All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our PhD Consortium panel. I'm Müge Yaylakulu, and I'll be moderating today's panel. And we are excited to bring together a group of distinguished scholars, and they will share their insights on building a successful academic career. And whether you are joining your doctoral journey, beginning your doctoral journey, or preparing for the job market, this session is designed to offer practical advice on publishing, job searching, networking, and long-term career strategy. All right, so I'm honored to introduce our distinguished panelists. Professor Ofer Baron. He's a distinguished professor of operations management at the Rotman School of Management, University of Toronto, and he is the co-founder and CEO of SimLQ, which builds AI-driven digital twins for processing simulations. And he holds a PhD from MIT and degrees from Technion, and has held visiting roles at Technion, SUFE, and Hebrew universities. His research spans queuing theory, business analytics, healthcare operations, and autonomous systems, with many publications in top journals and many awards. He is known for pioneering analytics works and co-launching the COVID PPE in Canada during the pandemic. So thank you so much for coming, Professor Ofer Burrow.
Thank you
Next
for
is Professor Guping Hu. She is the professor and uh, and chair of Systems Engineering and Operations Research Department at George Mason University. She previously held leadership roles at Oklahoma State and Iowa State. And her research, it was supported by NSF, USDA, DOE, and DOD with over $12 million in funding. And she works on sustainability, supply chains, and systems optimization research. She has published, again, many 100+ journal articles. She's an IISc fellow and recognized leader through ELA-TES and NSF iAspire fellowships. And she is the current president of our service science section at Informs. Thank you so much for being here. Professor Anyan Ki, he's a visiting associate professor at Cornell at this time, and his full-time position is at UT Dallas as an associate professor and PhD coordinator of the operations department. And he's specialized in socially responsible operations, strategic procurement, and supply chain management. He uses game theory, behavioral experiments, and data-driven optimization tools with publications, again, in top journals like Management Science and Operations Research. He serves on editorial boards of leading journals with multiple service awards, and his PhD is from University of Michigan and dual bachelor's degrees from Tsinghua University. Thank you so much for coming, Anya. And next, Professor Hari Natarajan. He's a professor of management and vice dean at Miami Herbert Business School. He teaches and leads programs in operations and supply chain management. He holds degrees from IIT Madras and Penn State, and his research applies to optimization to real-world supply chains and service networks with collaborations across industries and, again, publications in top journals. Hari serves as has a lot of senior editorial positions in PALMS, Decision Sciences, and he is also the president of the South Florida chapter of Informs. And again, he's won many awards, including IISc Best Paper and Provost Research Awards, just to name a few. Last but not the least, definitely, Professor Pınar Keskin-Ocak. She is the chair and professor in the Milton Stewart School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at Georgia Tech. She's also co-founder and director of the Center for Health and Humanitarian Systems. She served as the College of Engineering Advanced Professor and as interim associate dean for faculty development and scholarship. Prior to joining Georgia Tech, she worked at the IBM Watson Research Center. She received her PhD in OR from Carnegie Mellon and her MS and BS Industrial Engineering from Bilkent University. Her research applies operations research to health and humanitarian challenges, including infectious disease modeling, disaster response, and hospital operations. She has collaborated with organizations like the CDC, Red Cross, and Intel. She's an Informs Fellow and a past Informs President. She also serves a lot of senior editorial positions, including Operations Research and MSOM, and has held many leadership roles within Informs. And I am amazed just introducing all these wonderful scholars in this wonderful panel. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with our PhD communities. Shall we begin with maybe talking about research and publications? What does a strong research portfolio look like for someone entering the job market? How should early career researchers think about publishing, quality, quantity? What are your opinions? And what are the best strategies for securing research funding early in one's career if they are in an industrial engineering field? Please go ahead, jump in. So let's make it more like organic.
I can start. Well, Offer, I saw you unmute. Go ahead.
No, I was just unmuting myself, suggesting the last part of the question on funding and IE should go your way.
Well, part of the reason why I spoke up is that I'm the chair, the president of the Service Science. I felt like I need to, if no one is stepping to say something, because typically the opening tend to be quieter. And I really encourage our two students, Firat, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah.
Firat and Austin, feel free to jump in. We are here to support and help you, right? So if you have specific questions, raise your hand, put in the chat box. I know we are recording this for a broader audience, but since you're here in presence, we want to make sure your answers, your questions get answers. But to briefly respond to you get your question on the publication record, I think it depends. So we have, in this panel, we have a mix of industrial engineering as well as business school. So I know my background is in industrial engineering. So I think it's important to demonstrate definitely the quality. Although industrial engineering, there's quantity expectation as well, because that shows the productivity down the road. Now, I know for business school, there is a narrow group of journals that you would like to, or at least to get some presence in, so that people can evaluate the depths as well as the quality of the work, so that they know when you join their team, you can done quality work for, because in business school, it's less about funding, it's more about publication and mentorship and teaching. And with that, I'll make sure other people comment. So please jump in. I'm going to mute myself.
So I can offer some context. So I'm at the University of Miami. One of the challenges, and I'm in the business school. So Guiping, to your point, I don't have much insight on what to do for funding. I'm super glad that I'm in that position, though. So, what I would say is, look, when you're looking for someone early in their career, what you want is to make an investment on someone who would be a long-term success at your institution, right? So what does long-term success then look like? It looks like someone who can create meaningful and sustainable impact on the research and scholarship side. So, for us, that means not only are you moving the field, you're also trying to make some impact on society at large, whether that is through industrial consulting, whether that is through informing government policy decisions and broader societal impact, right? So if you think about a early career candidate coming out of PhD, or just a couple of years out of the PhD program, it is unlikely, although these days people are doing amazing things, it is unlikely that you'll have a large body of work. It's likely that you'll have, a few papers. So it's important that you're able to signal quality very, very clearly, even though the volume of output that you have is relatively small. One of the reasons why that becomes particularly important in business schools, at least in the mid-tier business schools, you don't have extremely large departments. So if you have one or two colleagues who don't have the necessary depth, it really brings the whole department down in terms of overall productivity and ability. So it's important that the committee that is evaluating you feels very, very comfortable that you have substantial depth in training, and therefore we can make an investment in this person as a long-term colleague. So I would slant heavily towards quality on the early career side, because that's an important signal that people want and don't want to make a mistake on.
Yeah, I agree with what Harry says in terms of the quality side of the work. I'm just thinking that publication is, of course, a strong signal for quality in the top journals. And the next thing that might be a signal for quality as well is some of the awards that the research can gain. So maybe for PhD students, you can send your papers to the student paper competition so that you can get some visibilities. And I think the coherent theme of the research is also somewhat important. So you can convince the audience of your research that you are growing to be an expert in a particular domain, whether in terms of the topics or in terms of the methodology. So this is what I think on this.
I'm waiting for Pinar. I wanna hear her wisdom, to learn something from her as well.
Oh yeah, thank you all for sharing. I agree with everything that you all said. I guess the way I think about it is really it depends, right? So it depends on who you are and what matters to you, and how do you want to live your life. And an important part of your life is at the workplace. So I guess my suggestion would be to really think about, imagine yourself some years down the road, maybe that's your retirement party, and you look back at your career and your life. What do you see, and are you happy with what you see? And just kind of think about the next 5, 10 years. Imagine yourself going to work every day in a particular place, and imagine what you are doing on a day-to-day basis. Does that excite you? So I think you could have two people with similar publications, similar awards, similar position, and they both could be successful, but maybe one is super happy and the other one is kind of like dragging their feet, even though they are achieving things. Maybe it's not exactly aligning with who they are. So that's kind of like my perspective. Really think about putting everything aside, the external recognitions or motivations, thinking about what you want to do and what mark you want to leave in the world.
I wanna also kind of support what you guys raised, but I think Pinar's kind of point really resonate well with me, because I remember kind of early in my career going to my favorite mentors, and one of them is Avishai Mandelbaum. And because in business schools we have kind of a list of journals that are preferred, and no big secret. Avishai told me, "Oh, this is nobody will tell me where to send my papers to, right? I mean, I know where to send my papers to. You cannot tell me where." So it's much easier to do when you're as senior as he was, right? And it's a little bit harder to do when you're young, when you're early in your career, when you should still establish yourself. But I think the message that Pinar is saying, hey, you need to be happy with what you're doing. If you're not going to be happy with what you're doing, you're not going to do it well anyhow, or you're not going to enjoy it. So I think this is really critical. So it's more than, oh, I want my next OR paper is, hey, I have this really interesting problem, or I have this really interesting methodology, and I enjoy playing with it, and I enjoy, as Harry said, opening new frontiers, so I can see the impact it's going to generate possibly only within, our community, right? Our publications, not everybody read them outside of our community, not even everybody in our community reads them, right? But you want to have some sort of an impact that you feel is important for you. So that's how I think about things now. You may want to unmute yourself.
Muge, you're on mute, so we cannot hear you. I can tell you are speaking.
Yes. So I just thought you were done. So just go ahead, please continue. Yes. Oh, you're done. Okay. All right. Very good. So wonderful. So I was wondering, maybe we should just like talking about all this like brings us to like the academic job market. So what do you expect from the candidates, and what do you see one mistake that the candidates make in the market when they come in, and what skills, experiences are the committees looking for? You have hired many fresh PhD students or early career scholars. What do you look for in them, and what kind of mistakes they make when they come for an interview? What do they do? What should they be doing in the job talk? And what do they wrong? What do they do things wrong? So what do you think? What's your experience?
I can pick it up. There are a couple of wrong things that can be done. One of them is to be very narrow in how you think about things. So as an extreme example, say that I allow you to teach an elective course. What will you be teaching it on? Oh, I want to talk about pricing of two items together. I'm going to give a course on that, right? That course is not going to fly. Nobody is going to take it. No MBA student is going to come and take it. So if this is your work and your PhD, we are all typically very close with it, but it doesn't mean that this is interesting to the whole wide world, essentially. So that's one main mistake that I have seen, being too narrow, not to the extent that I gave here, obviously. The other one is I want to see that you can teach, especially in the business school, right? I mean, I want a colleague for many years, and I don't want a colleague that I will have to step instead of them to teach a course because the students went to the dean's office, right? So now, what is delivering a good seminar? You can see, but I've seen some seminars that told me, hey, this person cannot. I'm really afraid of putting them in front of the classroom, and the main issue is how you deal with questions during the seminar, right? I mean, if when people ask a questions, you don't understand the question and you answer on something else. I think this is that. So I always prefer people who say, hey, this is how I understood your question. Is this okay? Right? Before you, then someone who doesn't understand and answering the wrong direction, right? Because this is something that happens with students all the time. And that's kind of a bad indicator.
Yeah, so I was thinking along the line that the mistakes job market candidates might make. So one thing I think is quite important is although it's a job market, everyone is looking for a job. I think the end of the game is not really a competitive game in the sense that one candidate can only go to one school, right? So even for the job market candidates getting 100 offers, they can only choose one school that eventually they will join. So to me, among the job market candidates, the cooperative side is perhaps more important than the competitive side of the market, because end of the day, the candidates in your cohort you would be the one eventually supporting each other, not just for this one time on the job market, but through your assistant professor's journey and also in the tenure promotion process, publication process. You can collaborate with each other. Many of the good things can happen. So don't be overly too competitive with each other on the job market. Be more collaborative. I was thinking that doing it this way, maybe you will have a more pleasant journey on the job market.
I agree with that. I still am in touch with a lot of my job market friends, I'm going to call them, so that I met them at the job market, and we still, meet at the conferences and talk, collaborate. Yes. Narhari, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is also understanding how the process works, right? So if you think of the market having, let's say, 100 very well qualified candidates and all schools trying to reach out, right? It's not clear that, I mean, yes, of course, there could be variances on who we think of as number one versus who you think of as number one. But largely, let's assume that, everyone knows who the top candidates are versus not. The way schools look at it is if you have a definite need that you have to fill by the next fall because you have teaching requirements or the line would expire or whatever the case may be, uh, they're not necessarily just saying, I want the number one candidate. They also want to make sure that they fill this slot because they don't know whether they'll get the slot next year or not. So, um, then it becomes important to signal to the university what your commitment level is in terms of applying to that position, right? So how do you signal that? You can figure out a way to actually do some research on the school, what their needs are, what the potential colleagues would work on, how you'd go about doing it. Be a little more intentional about your preparation for each school. Yes, I mean, not asking people to think of, 85 different statements of purpose, for instance, but at the same time, I mean, do some research before you go meet with faculty at the school, maybe attend a few of their talks at Informs to see if these are the guys that you actually can work with in the future. I think that goes a long way on the margin in terms of, going back to the point that Pinar was making, all other things being equal, which candidate would I want to bring to campus because we're bringing in only 3 or 5 or whatever small number of people you're bringing to campus is, right? So I think if you can do a few of those things on the margin, that would help a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it's a two-way process. It's important to remember they are interviewing you, but you are also interviewing them. So just being genuinely curious about the place and the people you are going to meet. It's a fantastic opportunity. You will learn so much in such a short time if you are genuinely interested in what everybody is doing, even though their research and teaching and interests might be very different than yours. It could be a fantastic opportunity for learning and for making connections. So that's one thing I would say. You see differences when, as we interview candidates, some are just very focused on whatever they are doing and nothing else seems to interest them, versus you get others who show a genuine interest about everything, that they're experiencing at the interview. I think that really makes a difference. So it's really important, I think, to keep that open mind. The other thing I want to kind of bring up to the discussion is I feel like in many ways we are in a transition point. I'm sure many people have said this in other times in history, right? So things are changing so fast, and things are looking very different right now than they did before. But in some ways, it is true with all of the AI wave and the technology. How is teaching gonna look like, or research or collaboration in academia 5-10 years from now? It's anybody's guess, I guess. We each probably have our own opinions on that. But that's another thing, I guess, for all of us who are hiring or who are applying for jobs to really think about how things might look like and what kind of candidates might be successful and productive in this rapidly changing environment.
Actually, if I could piggyback on what Pinar said, right? I think there's a broader context in terms of what happens within a PhD program versus what happens immediately after. I mean, most PhD programs encourage you to have some deep tunnel vision because you have to work on that paper, you have to go really deep on that topic and get into it. So sometimes it's actually very hard to lift your head up from that and see the forest from the trees. So an innocent question from one of the faculty on, where do you think you will be 5 years from now? I mean, I would wager that 95% of the answers that I've received for this question is, oh, I expect to be tenured. I mean, it's such a limiting thing to just think about that as the only goal one would have, right? I mean, you want to think slightly broader than that. But I'm not saying this is a flaw necessarily, right? But all I'm pointing is that our field and our training and most programs tend to encourage people to go very deep into one particular way of thinking. But I think it's important to lift your head up from the sand and look around and see what other people are doing. Is teaching really the way you want to go with things? Do you want to go to a more teaching school? Do you want to go to a more research-oriented school? There are all these different choices that you are making. Whether you think about it or not, you're still making the choice, right? So it's important for you to be more intentional about that.
So I agree with all the things that have been discussed. So some of the point that I'm going to make, it's drawing from previously serving as search committee chair, as well as right now as the chair and for a few years. So the first, I think, Harry, you talk about the process. So initially you just submit the package, right? So in order to go down to what people talk about in the on-site, you first need to go through the initial screening. So it's very, very important that you check typos. If we see very obvious typo in the application package, that's going to be immediate turning off, right? It's if you don't even spend the time to fix that, then of course we're going to look beyond that, but if there's something you can do to make that clean and professionally prepared, do that. So that's the application package. And have input from a variety of stakeholders, your advisor, your peer, people who recently have gone through the job market. So professionally prepare the application material. And then the next step is if you pass through that, then you'll get a Zoom interview. So during that process, my assessment, well, they will ask a variety of questions. And typically the way it works, at least in my experience, that the search committee will each get one question and they will focus on different perspectives. Some will be more focusing on the technical, some are less so, like evaluating that individual as a person. So for that, as well as later on site, I think Pinar, you talk about it a little bit. Show your curiosity, do your homework. If because sometimes we even see people mix up the universities. Okay, so just make sure that you spend the time, because it's an investment. Like Pinar, you talk about two-way interview, right? So the university is investing the time and energy, and you are investing. So take it very seriously. So the last stage is on-site. So once you're getting on the on-site, on the paper, you're doing great, right? Your publication record is strong. On the on-site, the homework is also important. I know, Harry, you talked a little bit about, looking at people's research. So previously, when I go on job interview, I try to remember people's names. So when I see offer, I'll just try to call out people's name. And people, if they can hear their name called in the correct manner, they will be impressed. So be prepared for the on-site. And on the on-site interview, people talk about all kinds of things, but I want to add one point, and that is don't overlook the interactions outside the job talk. They're evaluating you as a colleague, as a friend, as someone they want to spend time with. If you're not being collegial, when you're interacting with staff members. If you cannot even hold yourself together during that short period of time, people are going to be concerned about you as a colleague. So of course, I'm not going to go into details in terms of the job talk, but pay attention to the interactions outside the typical evaluation, like how you get picked up from the airport, how you get dropped off at lunch, dinner, and those type of things. Okay, so back to you, Miguel.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Just we can continue adding, like we don't have to just stick with the questions. So if you think something after the fact, just please go ahead and jump in and talk about that. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. And that also actually ties into the networking and collaboration and making connections even after the job market, right? So for more like early scholars, like within the first 3-4 years, how are you going to find a good senior person to collaborate? Okay, now it is time to move on from your advisor. So are you going to go alone? How are you going to find somebody to work with? How does that work? How do you recommend the early scholars initiate these collaborations, approach to senior scholars? What do you want to see as a senior scholar yourselves? How do you want some young scholar to come and ask you to work with them? How's that going to happen? And also the partnerships with companies. Like how do you approach a company and ask them for data? That's like you cannot just go and start talking. So how did you do that?
I'll jump in and add I think this goes back to what Pranav talked about earlier. Everyone's career path is different. You have to look inside about what you want. There's no single path for success. Some people may be more collaborative. Some people may decide to, stay few years more on the theoretical one and more individual contribution. I think you as a scholar, you have to think about what's important for you. But also, this is assuming you got hired at a university. Then
Yes.
You need to talk to the peer as well as, because you want to get tenure. I know earlier we were talking about tenure being short-sighted, but it's a very important milestone. If you don't get tenure, the rest doesn't matter. So ask about the tenure expectation. Talk with your chair. I mean, because there are certain things he or she will tell you that it is important for this institution, and you only have 5 years. It's actually much shorter than what you thought. So it's important to have a plan and kind of craft that along the way. So I'll stop there.
I think again, I'm gonna kind of go back to and I agree with what Guping said, following up on that, like really what's the end goal? What is it that you want to achieve? Some of the other things, how do you get funding? How do you find a collaborator? How do you get data? To me, those are mechanics. So once you have your eyes set on a specific goal, then you follow certain paths to get some of those mechanics worked out. Let's say if you are interested, if your research is broadly speaking health systems, so I'm going to give kind of an example from an area where I'm more familiar with. You really think about what is it that you want to change or positively impact in that space, and then that kind of gives you some directions about who to contact, whether it's in a hospital system or other environment. And then also listen, what is keeping them awake at night? If they had a magic wand, what problem would they solve? So that's kind of how the conversation begins in terms of collaborations. If you are doing more methodology focused work, it could look very different, right? So in that case, you might drive your inspirations for open problems or research problems, maybe more based on what's already in the literature, where the gaps are. So then that collaboration or that path might look a little bit different. But again, it really depends on kind of like what's your goal? Where are you trying to get?
If I can add to that, I mean, I think I agree that you have to know where you're going and then find the appropriate mechanics for it, right? Um, but finding where you're going itself is a journey. So if you don't know on day one exactly what you ought to be doing and you don't have perfect clarity, I don't think people should feel bad about it, right? It's not clear at all that you come out of the PhD program, you happen to work on a couple of problems that you thought at the time were the most interesting ones. You're perfectly welcome to change your mind along the way, right? So the process of discovery, I think, of self-discovery is just as an important one, and that runs parallel to whatever you're doing on the career side. For me, I take this personal example. Um, as perhaps a cautionary tale in some sense because it wasn't clear to me that I was interested in any one thing at all. I kept trying to get interested in it, but I just couldn't stick with it long enough. And so I initially perceived this as a huge character flaw, right? But then you realize, I just like solving interesting problems. That's who I am. It doesn't all have to be in one area. It doesn't all have to be in one methodology. I mean, whatever you can apply, you apply. So there's a place for everyone in our community, right? And that's the remarkable thing about it. I've heard senior faculty tell juniors, oh, you have to work in one area and establish, great gravitas in that area so that a letter writer can recognize you and write good things about you when it comes to tenure. That might very well be the case for some, but if you're not the person who's going to work on one type of problem or one methodology for a long time, then I think establishing um, exactly what you are and then figuring out a path that works for you becomes very important. And on having conversations with industry, my experience has been that even when you approach them with intent, the timing has to be right. They have to, be looking for something similar. There's so many other variables that are in play. So I think people should be prepared for a healthy dose of rejection along the way. I mean, for everyone who writes a paper saying, I had this great collaboration with this industry and we saved them 18% on the bottom line, etc., they probably had 10 other calls that didn't work out, right? So you have to prepare yourself for that, especially early in the career when you get these types of rejections. Uh, it feels very personal and you think, oh my God, I'm not cut out for this at all. But you should be assured that a lot of people have gone through this before. And so eventually you'll also come out of it. So just keep the faith and keep trudging along, and you'll eventually get success.
Yeah, I want to just quickly follow up. I totally agree. I think, some of us may have this win or lose mentality, especially coming out of a PhD program. Quoting a football coach, it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. So when you change your mindset, everything becomes, hopefully a bit more positive, because even if you follow a specific research direction and it may not lead to a great result or a publication, every step you learn. So I sometimes think of it like learning to drive, but lifelong learning. So the more mileage, the better driver you get. So the key is just to keep driving. So the more you spend putting time and effort, and hopefully, in the right directions, you don't want to be just kind of like doing everything for the sake of doing, but also you don't want to be stuck in an analysis paralysis, right? So like, what do I want to do? And you keep thinking what you want to do, but you also need to be doing something. So to figure out what is it that you want to do. So it's kind of like finding that balance.
Thank you. Thank you. These are amazing advice. Anything you want to add, Anyan? Over.
Yeah, I agree with what we just discussed. Yeah, I think it's quite important for the early career faculty to have a plan in mind. And in terms of the mechanical part, initiating research, for my own experience, I go to office like very regularly every day. So I just have some random chat with some of my colleagues. That is how some of my research got started. And also for some of my peers during my PhD time, we were friends back then, and then we talk a lot, right? We maybe not only about research, but also about life and many different things. And then occasionally we discussed something on new topics that all of us became excited. And then that is also how I got started with some of my projects with peer. So I was thinking that having a pipelines of these mixed projects with senior faculty, with peer, and perhaps even with PhD students that can help us maybe balance the time we use for the different type of projects. It could be helpful for the early career faculty as well. Yeah.
Yes, yes, very
Uh,
good.
I want to also address Firat's questions in the chat. I think it's always good to ask them what are the problems that bother you. So when you work with industry, I solve problem A. I don't have problem A, right? You will not sell it to me. So it's always better, I think, in the discussion with industrial partners, say, hey, what are your pain points? What is your biggest problem? Let's see if I can help, right? Now, if you following Pinal, I'll go to healthcare. If you go to healthcare, they they're they're worried about wait times, right? And they talk with operations professor, they are worried about wait times. I don't need to come and tell them, hey, I want to work on wait times, right? So you don't want to approach people who will have, hey, my problems are on things that we cannot help, right? You wanna approach people who have problems in the area that you can help, and in this sense, a little bit like Harry, there's an interesting problem there that I care for. I like working on it. I like to do that. But selling, you don't want to be selling your stuff. It's much harder task, I think. So yeah.
Maybe, we've been talking about the career strategy since the beginning, just to maybe build on that conversations. What do you think mistakes the early scholars are making? Did you make any mistakes that you think were mistakes and that you could do better? If you were an early scholar, what would you want to go back and tell yourself, like, don't do that? And also, one thing that Pinar mentioned, like the AI is coming. So, how is the academia shaping? I would really want to hear your opinions about that. What do you think? How do you see where our field is going? Where is scholars going with the AI's help, basically? Like, where is the field going?
I was going to comment on what Pinar talked about earlier. There is no mistake that's not worth making. So you either become successful or you learn from it. So I think as I progress in my career, we all make mistakes. Career choices, topics that you say, well, why did I spend this much time on this thing and it's not leading? But they are definitely learnings there. So if you approach it with a growth mindset, right? I either either this becomes successful or I learn from it, and that's achievement as well. I'll let other people comment on specific mistakes. I think I've made a lot that I cannot think of any specific ones at this point.
So maybe I can talk about my mistake, right? One of them. So I think I can pretty much relate to what Harry mentioned earlier. Me myself is also a problem-driven type of person. I have a lot of curiosities and I think about a lot of problems. It could be like in different domains with different methodologies. So the consequence of that was in the earlier few years of work I work on, when I put things on paper, it's really difficult for people to see a coherent thing of what I was working on, right? So following one of the questions we got in the chat, so I think at that moment, it's also quite important for you to get the feedback from the senior faculty, right? So for my midterm review, for example, I was told that before tenure, maybe it's better for me to pick two of the areas that I really want to focus on and publish more in these chosen two areas. And then after tenure, I can branch out more with more methodology and topics. So I think along the process for the earlier career faculty, it's quite important for you to hear the feedback from the colleagues, the senior faculties. So at UT Dallas, we got the annual review, we have the midterm review. So I think this is a good time for us to get feedback in terms of what we might have done wrong in the past few years, right? So I was thinking like this feedback is also quite important for me to correct the mistakes that I made. Because as Muge mentioned, the time is very precious, so we want to make sure that we spend the right amount of time on the important things.
Yeah, I'm gonna suggest like we change kind of our narrative. I generally like focusing on mistakes, doing something wrong. That may not be the most productive and positive way to look at things. Like you do things, some things work well, some things may not work as well. Again, it's a learning opportunity. So if you are so afraid about making a mistake, you are going to be paralyzed because then you can't take a step. You are just so worried, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? So again, you know, I think it's important not to get stuck in the analysis paralysis. If you are actually putting in some productive time into doing something, whether it's education related, whether it's learning, whether it's you actually working on something, that kind of helps you move forward. And again, you might take a step, it doesn't lead to exactly maybe where you hoped it would lead you. That is not necessarily a mistake. That's still you are learning something in the process. So I think that's really helpful. I agree about getting feedback, having mentors, more than one, ideally, a network of mentors is very useful because you are going to learn different things from each person. They will share with you their experiences, their perspectives, and then you cannot make all of them happy at the same time because sometimes the feedback you get might be conflicting. So you kind of need to synthesize all of it and then see what you can take to help you move forward. But you also need to remember to stay grounded to your own true values and what matters to you. Because if your entire life you spend trying to make other people happy, then it's unlikely that you will be happy. So it's kind of like striking the right balance in there.
I want to add two quick thoughts. One of them is really easy, and one of them is really hard. The really easy one is writing. So if you don't write well, if you don't write within the style that we are used to, you're going to have an extremely hard time publishing in our paper, in our journals, right? We are used to write in specific fashion. And I see this whenever I try to publish in another area, right? My writing style doesn't fit the way they think of things. So that's something that you need to be aware of. The other thing which I think is much harder, and it also related a little bit, Austin, to your question, is this work-life balance. So one of the nature of academic work is that it is infinite, right? I can always come up with another question. I can always try to improve the next algorithm to use AI even better, right? There's infinite amount of work to be done. If you overdo it, you pay on other parts of your being happy, as Pinar kind of said at the beginning, and as in your question, Austin, kind of with your happy self, as you said, right? So I think this is a critical point. I'm trying to look at your question more in depth and say, the stress, we have an internal stress and we have external stress. I find out that part of academic life is that the internal stress is typically larger than the external stress. For most of my successful colleagues, I think, right? This is kind of they have their own kind of how I measure things and what I want to achieve, what's the impact that I want to do, right? But it is certainly there, especially as Guiping said earlier, when you're before tenure, right? You really feel that you have to clear some marks and get that. So there is a pain of dealing with this stress. But my take is if this external stress is not really well aligned with your internal stress, maybe that's not a great path for you, right? And sometimes we fail on our things, right? I mean, we fail on things. It doesn't always work. I'm even feeling comfortable among this very small group of people to suggest that I had a couple of papers rejected in my past, right? So those failures are really a part of what you learn, and if you don't have a somewhat thick skin, it's very hard to do well in our profession. But to me, really, the key is the ability to balance it well with personal life. And sometimes the balance is leaning more towards one or the other, right? That's kind of something that you need to do with your loved ones and deciding on that, right? Pre-tenure, it's kind of common for the partner to take a lot of weight and you work like crazy, right? I have to publish, leave me alone, right? And it's legitimate, right? That sometimes you do these choices and sometimes you kind of do a little bit more and you take a sabbatical, you travel the world and enjoy that more than just work.
Yeah, so I'd like to add that, I mean, the idea of work-life balance, I think it's very, very hard to think of work-life balance on smaller time scales, right? Is every day of work, perfectly balanced in terms of work and life? Probably not. But as you think of larger units of time, you might approach something that seems like reasonably balanced, right? And how that works with the ecosystem that you're around, with colleagues, with friends, with family. I think that's the tricky part, to make sure that it's all well aligned. I mean, I want to go back to a point that was made earlier on. I mean, I think, uh, Muge, your question was, what advice would you give? It's not advice per se. I think it's more of a caution, which is that, in your PhD program, you probably read about 100 papers, right? 15 papers in each course in a seminar. Take 8 seminar courses, whatever. Some 100, 120 papers is what you're reading. Now, each of these has been very carefully selected by the faculty teaching that class and probably represents the top of the class in terms of papers in that particular area. So naturally, when you write your first or second paper, you're thinking, that's the yardstick that I'm going to measure my paper with. And often you'll find that it doesn't quite measure up in terms of impact, in terms of insights, in terms of this, that. Initially, at least when I stepped out of grad school, I found this very deflating, that, some of your best work is not quite having the same impact. But then there are thousands of papers that have been published in the same journals that haven't been included in your PhD seminar, which are all good papers too. It's just that your bias is slanted so much towards the 100 exceptional papers that'll probably stand the test of time, right? So it's like you're expecting a Nobel Prize with your first paper. I mean, it's not quite going to work out that way always, right? So what it does actually is it triggers a kind of perfection paralysis, which is to say that I'm working on this paper, I have a reasonable draft, but I don't want to submit it yet because I don't think it measures up to the papers that I have read at OR before, right? And so you just keep holding on to this, thinking by somehow holding on to it, miraculously some magic would happen and you'd get this great result. And, at some point, like Offer was saying before, you just have to develop some thick skin, send it, and say, look, if that result is absolutely essential, some reviewer will point it out and say, if you don't get this in, you're not going to get it. At which point you sharpen your focus and see what you want to do. So the key thing is to just keep making forward progress with every carry, and that's it. Eventually, good things will happen.
Thank you, Harry. Yeah.
So I'm gonna add two pieces of advice. One is maintaining and developing a growth mindset. So as PhD students, you were probably top of your class in your undergrad program, or go back all the way to high school, and then you come to the PhD program. It's a competitive environment. You go into academia or wherever you go, it's even more competitive. So it's easy to sometimes start thinking, oh, maybe I am limited. And you are not. Trust me, you are not limited. You're amazing. You have amazing opportunity to grow and learn, but you kind of need to keep that growth mindset. It's not like inherent anything that's limiting you. It's sometimes maybe your mindset could be. So always like keep that open mind, the growth mindset. You can always learn and grow and do different things. So the other piece of advice I want to give is habits. There's a lot of research, neuroscience on the formation of habits, how they form and how sometimes they're very difficult to change. And then establishing good habits, whether it's putting in time for productive work or being able to take time to do things outside of work, or meditation or whatever it might be. So very early on, I mean, I recommend this to students, even day one. Read a couple of books and really learn about the science behind habit formation, because it might really impact some of the things that you do, especially in this technology-infused life, where it's very, very difficult to move away sometimes. So habits and growth mindset, my two recommendations.
Thank you so much. Like Pınar, do you guys have any like closing remarks, any one last advice, anything that you didn't get a chance to say or just remember in between? So I think we're slowly on the closing portion of the webinar. I'm going to call this a webinar at this point.
There's
Yeah.
one thing. Sorry, Harry. Please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I think there's one thing that I like to quote Felipe Fesh, my colleague, on. He says, the paper can only be as good as the problem. Right? So if your problem is not very interesting, you can do the greatest paper, but it's not going to have impact, right? So I really think that when you think about the next problem, when you think about what else you want to do, think about having a problem that, oh, yeah, this is interesting, right? I can see myself, if it's the elevator pitch, in 30 seconds, I can get, some of our guys who understand my language to be excited about this, right? I don't have to impress my, somebody in a bar with that in 30 seconds. But for someone along this table, oh yeah, that's right. If you give me an exciting problem, then you can write an exciting paper. If the problem is not exciting, much harder to write a great paper.
Thank you, Offer.
Yeah. So, I think all of us want to be successful at some level, right? So I've been reading a lot about what it takes to be successful, and there is some wonderful literature on this. Some of which is written by this professor at Wharton called Angela Duckworth. And one of the books she talks about is this. One of the ideas she talks about is this idea of grit. So this is a person who's done lots of research on success in various fields, in academics, in music, in professional sports, CEOs, etc. And she talks about what are the predictors of success, and what are the habits and what are the things that we need to do. She says that the biggest predictor of success actually is not any natural endowment. It's not how smart you are. It's not what your SAT score was or whatever other criteria one could think of. It turns out that the biggest predictor of success is actually just how much grit and resilience you have. If you fall down, do you have the kind of intestinal fortitude to get up and start trying again? And you keep doing this, eventually success, however you define it, will happen for you. Right? When I read this, I found it to be very, very comforting because there's nothing naturally endowed about success. It's just whether you're willing to work hard and whether you're willing to put up with the few rejections that come along the way and stand up and try again. I mean, all of us, like Offer was saying, I mean, we've all had a paper rejected at some point of time in our lives,
Good
right?
to know.
Yes. I wasn't going to leave you alone on that island, Offer. This. So it's not that this has never happened to somebody before. It's just that they all chose to move past it and go on to the next one or fix this one and see how to become successful. So keeping that mindset, going back to Pinar's point about continually seeking growth in that way, it becomes very, very important. And if you keep this as a focus, I mean, I remember thinking back to how I was as an assistant professor. It just feels very overwhelming. Right? I have to do this. I have to be a successful teacher. I have to get 4.9 out of 5, whatever the criteria is. There's so many things that are going on. But if you just boil it all down to, look, all I have to do is just work hard and be productive. And, I'm going to plan, do these things, and then let the chips fall the way they may. Then life becomes a little more manageable, I think. You're taking bite-sized steps towards progress, and, life becomes a lot easier to handle. So that would be my parting thought. Just have grit and resilience.
Thank you.
I
Thank
want to
you.
thank Hari for very nicely articulating the growth mindset and the habits, because it's exactly like, have that positive mindset of growth and then have the habit to keep working hard. So that's really maybe easier said than done, but completely agree with everything you said. Thank you.
And I was going to jump into to add a point that's very similar. Recently I read a book. I don't remember the exact title, but it's not Angela. I've read Angela's book as well, but they were basically talking about in life you'll go through challenges, and part of the capability is how you get out of it and makes yourself back to the happy stage. And of course, you can define success, you can define happiness, but a point is that you have to define yourself, and also you can get back to the stage that, or the status that you are comfortable and happy. And I also want to add on this work-life balance. Although, tenure track life, it's different from industry job in a lot of ways. Well, it's convoluted. It's not set hours, 8 to 5. You basically convolute everything with life. But it's very, very important that you do think about there is life. You have spouse, you have partner, you have spouse, if you have kids, they're going to be so young for only a few years. My oldest daughter turned 18 2 weeks ago. And I still remember the day she was born. But life just, my point is that there's more to job than life. And there was a time when I was assistant professor, it was very stressful. And my husband was telling me that, well, if you don't get it, then maybe this is not meant for you. And it doesn't define you as a person. You can just find something else to do and you'll be successful. So my point is that don't overlook the other things more important in your life. And if those things make you happier, that's going to compromise some metrics that's going to be narrowly defined, then maybe think about that. It does publish one paper versus, but sometimes I felt like it's not necessarily trading off. When you are getting into the mental stage Pinar and Hari was talking about, it's not necessarily like you need to give up one thing for the other, but you do need to be cognizant that you live your life once, you define your way path forward and just be happy. Otherwise, you're going to burn yourself out. And you, your family, you don't want that.
Very, very good point. Thank you. Thank you, Gupe. Anyan, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Yeah, I like the happy visions the four other colleagues shared, and I completely agree with them on that. Maybe just on the career development part, I think it's great if you can have a supporting group with you, and perhaps going to some smaller conference that is more focused on what you do. I think it could be quite helpful for you to find that group of supporting people. And because informs it's very big, but it's very hard for people to talk about things in depth. But if you can go to some smaller conferences, perhaps you can also find your academic group of friends and family there that you will be able to share things together in depth on the career side. So yeah, that's my last sense to take.
Anything else? Anyone else wants to add? Any questions from my audience? We're all good. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody being here. And we just recorded this, so we're going to put it up there for those who missed the reminders and missed the webinar that we just created. Thank you so much. These were very vibrant discussion. Thank you so much, my panelists, for your generosity, for your candor. This was wonderful. Your advice is invaluable. It's so good. Even I learned a lot from these discussions. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your experiences, insights with with our community. And thank you for being a part of this very inspiring exchange. So I will see you all at Informs next week.
I want to say thank you to Müge for organizing this. It's a lot of work to coordinate everything and also make sure the availability. You know how hard it is to coordinate everyone's schedule, and the fact that we have 3 students and go out and talk to them about service science. We organize this thing, even if they didn't get a chance to join this live, they can watch the video, because part of the reason why we want to share is that that's going to make me happy. But anyway, thank you, Müge, for organizing this.
Thank you, Guping. I'm so happy that we did this. So we will share it with the rest of the community, and see you all at Informs in a week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank
See
you.
soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.